down the basement. Because one day, boys, you will have a cold woman of your own. You have to...
Got it.
Not you! I'm the coach, you're the receiver!
Great! What am I receiving?
Oh.
Hello!
Your self-image was defined by your first set of wheels.
Something is really wrong with me.
Do you remember that feeling of coming home from school in the 90s, turning on the television, and seeing Tim Taylor making another one of his blunders with power tools? Home Improvement wasn't just another comedy series. It was a sacred ritual for millions of families around the world. Between 1991 and 1999, this series conquered the hearts of an entire generation and defined what it meant to be a successful family sitcom. But behind those canned laughs, Tim's classic grunts and the philosophical conversations with Wilson at the fence, there's an entire universe of fascinating stories that most people never knew about. Today we're going to dive deep into the behind-the-scenes moments, curiosities and secrets that made Home Improvement an unforgettable cultural phenomenon. And if you also lived through this golden age of television, leave a comment down below telling us if you watched Home Improvement and what your favorite episode was. We want to know if you were Team Tim or Team Jill, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell to receive all the news about the TV classics that marked our lives. The story of Home Improvement begins long before the cameras started rolling. Tim Allen, the man behind Tim the Toolman Taylor, had a life trajectory that sounds like a movie script. Born as Timothy Allen Dick in 1953 in Colorado, Tim went through unimaginable tragedies in childhood. When he was only 11 years old, his father died in a terrible car accident. This devastating event completely shaped who Tim would become, and curiously, many of the themes about fatherhood and masculinity that we see in Home Improvement have deep roots in this loss. But Tim Allen's life had more twists and turns ahead. In the 70s, he was arrested for drug trafficking and spent more than 2 years in prison. It was precisely behind bars that Tim started doing comedy for other inmates, discovering his natural talent for making people laugh. When he got out of prison in 1979, he was determined to completely rebuild his life. He started doing stand-up comedy in small Detroit clubs, where he developed his macho man character, who loved tools and cars. This stand-up character was basically a prototype of the Tim Taylor we would know years later. The transition from the comedy club stage to television was an interesting journey. Tim Allen was having moderate success on the stand-up circuit when he appeared on Johnny Carson's show, The Legendary Tonight Show. His presentation was so impressive that executives from Disney and ABC started paying attention. They saw potential to transform that tool-obsessed character into a family sitcom. But here's something very few people know. Home Improvement almost didn't happen the way we know it. The first scripts for the series were completely different. The original idea was to make a show centered exclusively on the TV show within the show, Tool Time, without showing practically anything of Tim's family life. The executives imagined something more like Saturday Night Live in sitcom format, focused only on the shenanigans during the Home Improvement show tapings. It was Tim Allen who insisted that the series needed heart, that it needed to show family dynamics, conflicts between husband and wife, the challenges of raising 3 boys. He argued that people wouldn't connect just with jokes about tools, but with real stories about family, relationships, and personal growth. The casting choices were absolutely crucial and have fascinating stories behind each actor. Patricia Richardson, who played Jill Taylor, almost didn't accept the role. She was reluctant to do television because she wanted to focus on theater and film. Patricia already had a respectable career in New York theater and saw sitcoms as a step backward artistically. The producers had to practically beg her to at least audition. When she finally agreed to do the pilot, Patricia made it clear she was only doing it as a favor and had no intention of continuing if the series was approved. But something magical happened during the filming of the pilot episode. The chemistry between her and Tim Allen was undeniable, and Patricia realized that Jill Taylor wouldn't be just another sitcom wife making faces at her husband's nonsense. Jill was smart, strong, had her own dreams and ambitions, and served as a perfect counterbalance to Tim's exaggerated masculinity. Still, Patricia only agreed to sign a contract after the producers agreed to give more depth to the character, allowing Jill to go back to school and have her own storylines throughout the series. And speaking of cast, we need to talk about Wilson Wilson Jr., played by the brilliant Earl Hindman. The idea of never fully showing Wilson's face is perhaps one of the most iconic creative decisions in television history, but the story behind this choice is surprising. Earl Hindman was already an experienced actor when he was cast for Home Improvement. He had done Broadway theatre, appeared in important films, and had a solid career. When the creators presented the concept of hiding half the character's face, Earl was hesitant. He feared this would limit too much his acting possibilities and that the audience wouldn't be able to connect with a character they never saw completely. But the series creators, Carmen Finestra, David McFadzean, and Matt Williams, had a very specific vision. They wanted Wilson to be almost a mystical figure, an oracle of wisdom who existed on a slightly different plane of reality. Hiding his face wasn't just a funny visual trick. It was a philosophical statement about how true wisdom often comes from unexpected and mysterious places. Earl eventually completely embraced the concept and transformed that limitation into pure art. He learned to act only with his eyes and body language, creating one of the most memorable characters of 90s television. The three boys who played the Taylor sons also have incredible stories. Zachary Ty Bryan, who played Brad, the oldest son, was actually extremely different from his character. While Brad was the popular athlete and sometimes somewhat airheaded, Zachary was a quiet and studious kid who preferred reading books to playing sports. Jonathan Taylor Thomas, who played Randy, the middle son, became one of the biggest teen idols of the 90s. What many people don't know is that Jonathan was incredibly mature for his age and had very strong ideas about his career and education. When he was only 16 years old, Jonathan made the surprising decision to leave the series before the final season to be able to attend university and have a normal teenage life. This caused panic among the producers because Randy was one of the most popular characters, but Jonathan didn't back down. He prioritized his education and mental well-being over fame and money, something extremely rare in Hollywood, especially for someone so young. Taron Noah Smith, who played Mark, the youngest son, was only 7 years old when the series began. Watching Taron grow up on screen was a unique experience for the audience, but unfortunately his life after Home Improvement was turbulent, with legal and family problems that he has discussed openly in recent interviews. Now let's talk about something that makes many people curious: the real relationship between the actors behind the scenes. Unlike many series where the cast secretly hates each other, the Home Improvement environment was genuinely harmonious. Tim Allen was known for taking care of the cast as if they were his real family, especially the boys. He made sure the young actors had time to play and be children between shoots. Patricia Richardson and Tim developed a deep and authentic friendship that continues to this day. They had an unwritten rule of always supporting each other, both in scenes and in real life. When Patricia was going through her divorce during filming, Tim was a rock of support, and when Tim faced his own personal demons, Patricia was there for him. This genuine connection showed on screen, and it's one of the reasons why the marriage between Tim and Jill seemed so real and convincing. And here's a detail that will surprise many people. If you're enjoying discovering all these secrets about Home Improvement, don't forget to leave your like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any nostalgic content like this. We really want to know in the comments, did you watch Home Improvement back in the day? Tell us which character you identified with most. The Tool Time show within Home Improvement deserves its own analysis because it was genius on several levels. The idea of having a show within a show allowed the writers to do meta-comedy and explore the duality between Tim's public persona and his real life. Richard Kahn, who played Al Borland, Tim's patient and often exasperated assistant on Tool Time, has an absolutely unbelievable casting story. Richard wasn't the first choice for the role. In fact, the original pilot was filmed with a completely different actor as Al. This actor was Stephen Tobolowsky, a Hollywood veteran you'd probably recognize from dozens of movies. But due to chemistry and timing issues, the producers decided to reshoot the Tool Time scenes. Richard Kahn was in Los Angeles going through financial difficulties, trying to get any acting work possible. He had gone to the Department of Motor Vehicles to renew his driver's license, and by pure coincidence ran into an agent who mentioned that Home Improvement was looking for a new Alborland. Richard went to audition without much hope, but his warm and genuine interpretation of the character won everyone over immediately. The dynamic between Tim Allen and Richard Kahn became one of the most beloved parts of the series, with Al serving as the voice of reason against Tim's destructive impulses. The famous plaid flannel shirts that Al wore in every episode also have their own story. In the beginning, the wardrobe department had Al wearing different clothes in each episode, but Richard Kahn suggested that Al should always wear flannels because it would be more authentic for a guy who really works with tools. This became so iconic that plaid flannel shirts had a resurgence in men's fashion in the 90s, partially thanks to Al Borland. The Carhartt company, famous for work clothes, saw their flannel sales explode during Home Improvement's run, although they never paid for product placement. It was an organic phenomenon where life imitated art. Another fascinating aspect of Tool Time was that the tools and projects shown were real and functional. The production hired consultants specialized in construction and renovation to ensure everything was authentic. Many of the projects that Tim and Al showed on the program were later donated to schools or charitable organizations. The series had a real commitment to showing practical skills accurately, even when making comedy with them. Speaking of tools, we need to discuss sponsorship and product placement in Home Improvement. The series was pioneering in integrating brands organically into the narratives. Sears Craftsman became practically synonymous with the show, with their tools appearing in virtually every episode. But here's something few people know. Initially, several tool brands competed fiercely to be Tim the Toolman Taylor's official tools. Sears Craftsman won this battle by offering not just money, but also technical consulting and unlimited access to their latest products. This partnership was so successful that Sears created special tool lines with the Tooltime brand, which became instant bestsellers. The series' philosophy was that product placement would only work if it was authentic, so Tim Allen actually used and tested the tools before allowing them to appear on the show. He turned down several lucrative deals with brands that didn't meet his quality standards, which further increased the series' credibility with the male audience who actually worked with tools. The studio laughter and live filming were crucial aspects of the Home Improvement experience. The series was filmed in front of a live audience every week, which created a special energy you can feel watching the episodes. Being in the Home Improvement audience was one of the most sought-after tickets in Hollywood during the 90s. People would line up for hours to get in. Tim Allen loved interacting with the audience between takes, doing impromptu stand-up and answering questions. Many of the series' best jokes came from these spontaneous interactions with the public. The writers paid attention to what made the audience laugh most intensely, and frequently rewrote scenes in the middle of filming to maximize comic impact. Patricia Richardson says that filming nights were marathonally long, often going until midnight or later, because Tim insisted on doing multiple takes of each scene until getting the most genuine and explosive laugh reaction from the audience. Home Improvement special episodes frequently featured guest stars who brought their own fascinating stories. When Pamela Anderson appeared as Lisa, the original Tooltime girl, before being replaced by Debbie Dunning as Heidi, she was still at the beginning of her career. Pamela had just left Baywatch, and her appearance on Home Improvement helped cement her status as a sex symbol of the 90s. But what few people know is that Pamela and the cast didn't get along particularly well. There was tension behind the scenes because Pamela was more focused on her growing modeling and film career than on developing the character. When she decided to leave to focus on other projects, the producers were initially worried, but Debbie Dunning's entry as Heidi ended up being a blessing. Debbie had much better chemistry with Tim and Richard, and Heidi became an integral part of Tooltime in a way that Lisa never was. Other special guests included legends like Bob Vila, who played himself as Tim's rival on the show. The rivalry between Tim Taylor and Bob Vila was hilarious because Bob is a real figure from Home Improvement television, and seeing him make comedy with his own public image was meta and ingenious. Bob appeared several times throughout the series, and the competitive dynamic between him and Tim provided some of the show's most memorable moments. Interestingly, Bob Vila initially hesitated to participate because he feared that doing comedy might hurt his credibility as a serious home improvement expert. But he had so much fun on set that he ended up appearing several times and always speaks fondly about the experience. Other special appearances included famous athletes, since the series loved making references to sports, especially football and race cars. Tim Allen, being a huge motorsports fan, managed to bring several professional drivers to the show, including some champions who played fictionalized versions of themselves. The Taylor house is another iconic element that deserves discussion. That suburban house with the fence where Wilson gave his advice was built in a studio and was incredibly detailed. The art department created each room with meticulous care, from the garage full of tools to the kitchen where so many family conversations happened. An incredible curiosity is that the house changed subtly throughout the seasons, reflecting the Taylor family's financial growth as the Tool Time show became more successful in the series' timeline. Furniture was updated, decorations changed, and these small details added realism. The kitchen saw more renovations than any other room, partially because it was where many crucial scenes took place, but also because Tim was constantly destroying and rebuilding things. The backyard, where Wilson's famous fence was actually much smaller than it seemed on television. The magic of cinematography made it look like a spacious area, but in reality it was a compact set, built to maximize efficiency. And since we're talking about sets and the construction of the series, this is a great moment to remember. If you're enjoying this whole nostalgic journey through the behind-the-scenes of home improvement, please subscribe to our channel right now. We have much more content like this about classic TV, and your subscription directly supports our work of researching and bringing these incredible stories. Leave a comment saying if you remember watching Home Improvement when it aired on broadcast TV, and share this video with that friend or family member who was also a fan of the series. Each like, each comment, and each subscription helps our channel grow and continue producing this type of quality content. The Home Improvement writers formed an extremely talented writers' room that included several names who would later become important in Hollywood. They worked at an intense pace, producing 25 episodes per season during most of the series' run. The writers' room philosophy was to balance physical comedy with genuine emotional moments. Each episode generally followed a formula where Tim created some kind of problem through his arrogance or lack of consideration, then received wisdom from Wilson presented in an enigmatic and metaphorical way, and finally applied that wisdom to solve the situation, often in an imperfect and human manner. But within this structure, there was enormous creativity. The writers were encouraged to bring their own family experiences to the scripts. Many of the most touching stories about the Taylor sons were based on real events from the writers' lives. The episode where Randy has to deal with the death of his schoolmate, for example, came from a traumatic experience one of the writers had as a teenager. The series also wasn't afraid to tackle more serious themes when appropriate. There were episodes dealing with death, illness, school problems, bullying, and even issues of identity and masculinity that were surprisingly progressive for a mainstream family sitcom of the 90s. The episode where Tim deals with his father's death years later, finally confronting the grief he had suppressed for decades, is cited by many fans as one of the series' most powerful moments. Tim Allen brought his own personal pain to that performance, and you can see genuine emotion in his eyes during those scenes. There was nothing fake or manufactured there. It was therapy happening in real time, disguised as family entertainment. Patricia Richardson also had episodes that explored Jill's frustrations with her own identity, beyond being a wife and mother. Her decision to go back to school to study psychology was a storyline that resonated with millions of women who felt trapped in traditional roles and wanted more. The Home Improvement theme music is instantly recognizable, but few know its origin. Composed by Dan Folliart, the music had that rockabilly energy that perfectly captured the spirit of the show. But what makes the opening really special are the subtle changes that happen throughout the seasons, reflecting the aging of the boys and the evolution of the family. If you watch the openings chronologically, you can see the actors growing and changing, which adds an extra layer of nostalgia. The opening sequence showed Tim doing various mishaps with tools, and many of these scenes were filmed specifically for the opening. They weren't part of actual episodes. There was a separate budget just for creating these sequences, which demonstrates how much the production valued every aspect of the show. The custom tools that Tim created throughout the series became legendary. From super-powered chainsaws to drills that looked like space weapons, imagination had no limits. What many people don't realize is that many of these tools were actual practical creations built by the special effects department. They really worked, although usually in dangerous and impractical ways, exactly like Tim's tools on the show. The special effects team loved the challenge of making these crazy inventions into reality. There were several minor accidents during filming when the modified tools worked too well or in unexpected ways. Tim Allen got slightly burned on more than one occasion, but he always laughed and insisted on continuing filming. His dedication to the realism of physical comedy was impressive. He did most of his own stunts and mishaps, refusing to use stunt doubles except in the most dangerous situations. The relationship between home improvement and the DIY home improvement culture of the 90s cannot be underestimated. The series premiered at a time when do-it-yourself culture was exploding in the United States. Stores like Home Depot and Lowe's were expanding rapidly, transforming home improvement from a specialized niche into a mainstream hobby. Home improvement rode this wave perfectly, making tools and home improvement projects accessible and fun for a mainstream audience. Many people started their first home improvement projects inspired by what they saw on the show. Tool stores reported significant sales increases during the series' run, particularly in items featured in recent episodes. This created a symbiotic relationship where the series both reflected and simultaneously drove a larger cultural shift. But not everything was roses behind the scenes. Like any long-running production, home improvement had its share of tensions and conflicts. There were creative disagreements between Tim Allen and the producers about the direction of the series. Tim frequently wanted to take his character in more dramatic and emotional directions, while the producers felt pressure from the network to keep the show light and focused on comedy. These tensions occasionally resulted in scripts being rewritten at the last minute or entire episodes being scrapped. Patricia Richardson also clashed with network executives about how Jill was portrayed, insisting she be more than just the eye-rolling wife. These creative battles, while stressful, ultimately resulted in a better and more nuanced show. Salary negotiations also created some headaches. As the series became more successful, Tim Allen naturally commanded increasingly higher salaries, eventually becoming one of the highest-paid television actors of his time. Patricia Richardson and Richard Kahn had to negotiate hard to ensure their salaries reflected their importance to the show. There were moments when it seemed the cast might not return for new seasons because of contract disputes. Zachary Ty Bryan, Jonathan Taylor Thomas, and Taron Noah Smith, despite being children, also faced complicated negotiations as they aged and became more aware of the value they brought to the show. Jonathan Taylor Thomas, in particular, had representatives who negotiated aggressively on his behalf, recognizing that he had become one of the most popular young actors in America. The decision to end home improvement after 8 seasons was complex and emotional. Unlike many series that are cancelled abruptly, Home Improvement had the luxury of planning its ending. But there was disagreement about when was the right time to finish. Tim Allen felt the series still had story to tell and was open to continuing. Patricia Richardson, however, was ready to move on, feeling that 8 years was enough and that the show should end while still at its peak, not waiting until quality declined. Jonathan Taylor Thomas had already left in the 8th season, which created a void. Zachary Ty Bryan and Taron Noah Smith were growing up and wanting to explore other opportunities. In the end, the decision was made collectively to end the series with dignity, giving the characters and fans appropriate closure. The final episode, which aired in May 1999, was watched by more than 35 million viewers, making it one of the most watched series finales of that decade. The episode showed Tim facing the possibility of moving his family to Indiana for a job promotion, eventually deciding to stay in Detroit because home is where his family is happy. It was a perfect ending that reflected the series' core values about family being above everything. The final scenes, especially the last conversation between Tim and Wilson, were loaded with real emotion. The actors were genuinely saying goodbye, not just to the characters, but to a phase of their lives that defined almost an entire decade. When the camera finally revealed Wilson's complete face in the last moment, it was a conscious decision to give fans something special, breaking the series' most sacred rule as a farewell gift. Life after Home Improvement took very different paths for each cast member. Tim Allen became a movie megastar, starring in hits like Toy Story, as the voice of Buzz Lightyear, the Santa Claus and its spin-offs, and Galaxy Quest. He eventually returned to television with Last Man Standing, which lasted 9 seasons, and in many ways was a spiritual successor to Home Improvement, with Tim again playing a conservative man navigating a changing world. Patricia Richardson continued acting in theatre, television and film, although she never again reached the level of fame she had with Home Improvement. She has spoken openly in interviews about how the intense fame was sometimes suffocating and how she values having a quieter career now. Richard Kahn had steady work after the series, including a period as host of Family Feud, but Al Borland remains his most iconic role, and he embraces it fondly. The three boys had more complicated trajectories, as often happens with child actors. Zachary Ty Bryan continued acting sporadically, but shifted his focus to production and business. He's had some legal troubles in recent years that tarnished his image, which was sad for fans who grew up with him. Jonathan Taylor Thomas became famous for essentially leaving Hollywood at the peak of his fame. He made some occasional appearances in films and series, including a return for a few episodes of Last Man Standing as a favor to Tim Allen, but focused mainly on education and living a private life away from the spotlight. Taron Noah Smith also left acting, having experiences with vegan food businesses and facing his own personal challenges. He has been vocal about the difficulties of growing up under public scrutiny and the challenges of having so much money and fame so young. Home Improvement's legacy is immense and multifaceted. The series helped define what family sitcoms could be in the 90s, balancing comedy with moments of genuine heart. It influenced shows that came after, from Everybody Loves Raymond to Modern Family, showing that you could make intelligent family comedy that appealed to both adults and children. The series also had cultural impact in terms of representations of masculinity and family life. Tim Taylor was an interesting character because he was simultaneously a parody of toxic masculinity and an empathetic exploration of how men deal with emotions and relationships. The series never punished Tim for being masculine or liking tools and cars, but constantly challenged him to grow emotionally and be a better husband and father. And speaking of legacy, you who are watching this video are part of that legacy. Every time we share these memories, every time we laugh remembering a classic episode, we keep the spirit of Home Improvement alive. That's why creating content like this is so important to us, and that's why your subscription to the channel means so much. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do it now. Click that red subscribe button, turn on notifications, and if you want to support our work even more, share this video on your social media. Leave a comment telling us your favorite Home Improvement memory, which episodes marked you, and if you'd like to see more nostalgic content like this about other classic shows. Your participation isn't just appreciated, it's essential for us to continue producing this type of quality material. Home Improvement also needs to be understood in the context of the 90s television landscape. It was an era where family television dominated primetime audiences. Shows like Full House, Family Matters, Step by Step, and The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air all coexisted in an ecosystem where family sitcoms were America's most popular content. Home Improvement stood out in this crowded field by consistently being one of the most watched series, frequently appearing in the top 5 most viewed shows per season. Its popularity transcended demographics, appealing equally to men and women, young and old, different social classes, and geographic regions. It was truly universal television, in a way that's rare to see today in our fragmented media landscape. Home Improvement's international distribution also contributed to its iconic status. The series was exported to dozens of countries around the world, often with creative titles and dubbing that tried to capture the spirit of the original. In Brazil, for example, it was known as Momento de Reforma or Casos e Coisas de Casa, depending on the broadcaster. In other countries, translators worked hard to adapt the jokes specific to American culture, about tools and renovation to local contexts. It didn't always work perfectly, but the show's universal family dynamics transcended cultural barriers. Families in Tokyo, São Paulo, Paris, and Sydney could relate to the struggles between Tim and Jill, with the boys' problems growing up, with Wilson's wisdom. This global reach transformed home improvement from an American phenomenon into an international cultural event. Home improvement reruns kept the show alive in the decades after its end. For years, you could find episodes airing on cable channels at any time of day. A whole new generation discovered the series through these reruns, children who weren't born when the show originally premiered. This speaks to the timeless appeal of the show. While some 90s sitcoms aged poorly, with jokes and references that seem dated, Home Improvement maintains an eternal charm. The family dynamics it explores are universal and enduring. Every teenager still deals with peer pressure and identity. Every couple still has disagreements about money, child-rearing, and priorities. Every father still struggles to connect with his children and understand what they're going through. These themes never get old. DVDs and now streaming of Home Improvement allowed fans to revisit the complete series in ways that weren't possible during its original run. When you can watch episodes consecutively, new patterns and depth emerge. You notice how characters grow and change gradually through the seasons. You catch references and continuity you might have missed when episodes aired weekly with months of hiatus between seasons. You appreciate the craft of writing and acting in new ways. Many fans report that they appreciated the series even more on adult revisits, catching layers of humor and emotion that went unnoticed when watching as children. The Home Improvement fandom phenomenon also deserves recognition. There were and still are dedicated communities of fans who discuss episodes, share memories, create fan fiction and fan art, and keep the show's flame burning. In the early days of the internet, discussion forums and fan sites about Home Improvement were abundant. Fans compiled episode guides, lists of featured tools, tracked every guest appearance, and debated endlessly about the series' best moments. This kind of passionate fan engagement was a precursor to the modern fandom cultures we see around shows today. Home Improvement helped demonstrate the power of dedicated fans in keeping a series relevant long beyond its original run. There was also abundant merchandise associated with Home Improvement. From lunchboxes and action figures to video games and books, the Home Improvement brand was everywhere at the series' peak. The Home Improvement video games for Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis are particularly notorious among retro game collectors, not necessarily for being good, but for being fascinating artifacts of 90s TV merchandising. There were also comics, calendars, posters, and even an official Home Improvement board game. Tim Allen wrote a book called Don't Stand Too Close to a Naked Man during the series that became a bestseller, capitalizing on his Home Improvement persona. Reflections on how Home Improvement approached technology are also interesting. The series captured a specific moment where the internet was just beginning to enter American homes. There were episodes dealing with the boys using computers and the internet, but technology was still peripheral to most stories. Phones were landlines, not cell phones. Entertainment came from television and not streaming. Communication was face-to-face or by landline phone, not text messages or social media. Watching Home Improvement now is seeing a world that feels simultaneously familiar and alien. A time capsule from a pre-smartphone, pre-social media era that existed only 25 years ago, but feels much more distant. The lessons and values promoted by Home Improvement also deserve analysis. At its core, the show was about communication, growth, and family. Tim started most episodes with a limited or selfish perspective, but through conversations with Wilson and eventually confrontations or honest conversations with Jill, he grew and changed. This arc was repeated week after week but never got old because each situation was unique. The show taught that it was okay to make mistakes, as long as you learned from them. It taught that listening is more important than always being right. It taught that masculinity isn't about never showing emotion or vulnerability, but about being strong enough to open up and grow. These were valuable messages disguised as light comedy and likely influenced an entire generation of viewers in ways they don't even fully realize. Looking back with the perspective of more than 2 decades, Home Improvement holds up admirably well. Of course, there are dated elements and episodes that haven't aged perfectly, but the heart of the series remains intact and resonant. It's a series about imperfect people trying to do their best, about family love surviving mistakes and misunderstandings, about growth and change being continuous processes that never really end. Tim Taylor never became perfect, never completely stopped making the same mistakes, but he kept trying, and that's more honest and relatable than any perfect redemption arc could be. Home Improvement's lasting impact on its creators, cast and crew also cannot be ignored. For many people who worked on the show, it was the high point of their careers, the project they'll always be remembered for. They speak about those years fondly and proudly, recognizing they were part of something special. The friendships formed on set lasted decades. Tim Allen and Patricia Richardson still talk regularly. Richard Kahn appeared in several of Tim's projects over the years. There's a Home Improvement family that persists long after the cameras stopped rolling. As we approach the end of this journey through the behind-the-scenes and legacy of Home Improvement, it's worth reflecting on why this show still matters, why we still talk about it, why videos like this still find eager audiences. Part of it is certainly pure nostalgia, the desire to revisit a simpler time in our lives when we could sit with our family in front of the TV and share laughs together. But it's more than that. Home Improvement represents values and storytelling styles that many people miss in modern television. There's a longing for shows that can make you laugh and think, that treat family and relationships with sincerity, even while making comedy, that aren't cynical or ironic, but genuinely warm and human. In a world of increasingly fragmented and specialized television, where every show is targeted to a specific demographic niche, there's something refreshing about revisiting an era where shows like Home Improvement tried to appeal to everyone. It wasn't perfect, it certainly had blind spots and limitations, but it had a generosity of spirit and an ambition to connect with the widest possible audience that's admirable. It was television that tried to unite rather than divide, that looked for common ground, rather than exploiting differences. So yes, Home Improvement was a successful 90s sitcom about a guy who likes tools and constantly causes problems. But it was also much more. It was a cultural commentary on masculinity and family. It was a vehicle for reflections on growth and change. It was a shared space where millions of people could gather and experience joy together. It was, in the best sense, a home away from home for viewers for 8 years. And the echoes of that home still resonate today. Every time someone grunts like Tim Taylor, every time someone makes a joke about always needing more power, every time someone seeks wisdom from a neighbor through a fence. I hope this journey through the secrets, behind the scenes and legacy of Home Improvement has brought back happy memories and perhaps even revealed some things you didn't know about this beloved series. If you made it this far in this video, thank you for dedicating your time. It means a lot to us. And as a final request, if you enjoyed this content, please subscribe to the channel, leave your like, turn on notifications, and share with other Home Improvement fans. Every subscription, every interaction helps our channel grow and allows us to continue creating nostalgic and in-depth content like this. Tell us in the comments, what was your favorite Home Improvement episode? Did you prefer Tim or Jill? What was the most memorable moment of the series for you? We want to hear your stories and memories. Until the next video, keep your tools safe and your families close.